The garage door rolled up with a slow creak, letting sunlight spill over the polished black car inside. I had just stepped forward to pull it out when a sharp, furious voice tore through the air. "That's my car, you thief." I turned to see Karen, our HOA president, storming across the driveway, phone in hand, screaming into it as if her life depended on it. Moments later, I heard her shout into the receiver, "I'm calling 911. He's stealing my brand new car." My stomach sank. She wasn't bluffing. The morning had started out quiet. The kind of peaceful Sunday where the world feels like it's in no rush to do anything. The sun was warm but not too bright, spilling over my driveway in golden patches. A light breeze whispered through the oak trees that lined the street, carrying the faint scent of freshly cut grass from somewhere down the block. I'd just finished my coffee, still wearing an old t-shirt and sweatpants, when I decided it was as good a time as any to finally get into the garage and take a look at the clutter I'd been meaning to sort for weeks. I pressed the button on the wall, and the garage door rattled to life with its usual sluggish groan. It rolled upward, letting sunlight pour into the dim, oil-scented space. My eyes adjusted to the sudden brightness, and that's when I froze. Parked right in the middle of my garage, in perfect alignment with the faded oil stain where my old truck used to sit, was a shiny black luxury sedan. It looked brand new, the kind of car you only see in commercials, sleek, spotless, and expensive enough to make you wonder if it came with its own bodyguard. The chrome trim sparkled like it had just been polished, and the leather seats inside still had that stiff, untouched look. My first thought was that my wife, Emily, had rented something for the week, maybe for one of her business clients. She'd worked in real estate and sometimes had to impress people with high-end showings. But when I stepped inside and called her name, she came out of the kitchen drying her hands on a towel, giving me a puzzled look when I asked about the car. "What car?" she asked, tilting her head. "The one in the garage," I replied, pointing toward the open door. She walked over, peered inside, and her brows pulled together in confusion. "That's not ours," she said firmly. The words sank in slowly. I stood there for a moment, hands on my hips, trying to make sense of it. The garage door had been closed since I got back from my business trip 2 days ago, and we hadn't given anyone access. My spare keys were all accounted for, and the side door had been locked. I walked around the car, inspecting it like a detective. At a crime scene, the paint was so flawless it reflected my face as I moved. I glanced at the license plate, a temporary dealer plate from a lot across town. That was when I remembered something. At last week's HOA meeting, Karen, our self-appointed queen of the neighborhood, had been bragging non-stop about ordering a statement vehicle from a luxury dealership. She'd made a point to mention that it would turn heads and put this neighborhood on the map. I'd tuned out most of her speech, as I usually did when she went on her self-promotional rants, but I remembered her talking about the exact make and model that now sat in my garage. I laughed quietly to myself, thinking there had to be some kind of delivery mistake. The dealer must have typed in the wrong house number and put it in my garage instead of hers. It was an odd situation, but nothing worth panicking about. I figured I'd call the dealership in the morning to sort it out. In the meantime, I wasn't going to touch it. I didn't even open the door or step too close. It wasn't mine, and I wanted there to be no question about that. That small, reasonable plan lasted until the next morning. I had just stepped outside, planning to back my own car out for a grocery run, when I decided to open the garage and check on the sedan again. Maybe the dealership had realized their mistake and sent someone overnight. But no, there it was, still gleaming under the pale daylight. I barely had time to step closer before I heard a loud, shrill voice cutting through the quiet street. "What do you think you're doing?" I turned to see Karen striding toward me like a storm in heels. She was wearing a floral blouse and oversized sunglasses, her blonde bob bouncing with every furious step. Her face was flushed, her lips pressed into a tight, angry line. She clutched her phone in one hand like it was a weapon, and her other hand was already pointing toward the car. "That's my car," she barked. "You've got some nerve." I blinked, caught completely off guard. "Your car, Karen. I think there's been some kind of... Don't you play dumb with me," she snapped, cutting me off. "I knew you were jealous when you heard I was getting it. You broke into my garage and took it, didn't you?" My jaw dropped. "Broke into your garage, Karen? This is my garage." I gestured at the brick walls, the workbench with my tools, the stack of paint cans in the corner. "See that lawnmower? That's mine. Those boxes, mine. This isn't your property." But she wasn't listening. She was already raising the phone to her ear. "I'm calling 911, she declared, her voice trembling with righteous fury. "You're stealing my brand new car right in front of me." I took a step back, hands raised in disbelief. "Karen, hang on, listen to yourself. I didn't steal anything. It was here when I got home from my trip. The dealership must have." "I'm done hearing your lies," she interrupted, her voice growing louder. "The police will deal with you." She spun on her heel and began pacing on the sidewalk, already relaying a dramatic story to the dispatcher about how her neighbor had a history of hostility and was currently attempting to drive off in her luxury vehicle. By now, a few curtains in nearby houses had twitched open. I saw Mrs. Callahan across the street standing on her porch, clutching her coffee mug with wide eyes. Two teenage boys I recognized from down the block had pulled out their phones and were recording the scene, grinning like they'd just scored front row seats to a live drama. I felt a knot forming in my stomach. I'd dealt with Karen's nonsense before, letters about my trash cans being unsightly, warnings about the color of my mailbox, but this was something else entirely. A false police call over a car I hadn't touched. This could spiral out of control fast. I took a deep breath and tried one last time. Karen, I'm telling you the truth. You can check the delivery slip with the dealership. This garage has been locked for days. If the car's yours, fine, come get it. But don't accuse me of theft when you know nothing about what happened. Her sunglasses hid her eyes, but I could tell she was smirking. We'll see what the police think. And just like that, the sound of distant sirens began to drift through the air. It's funny how quickly a peaceful morning can turn into chaos. One moment I was thinking about cleaning out old paint cans, and the next I was standing in my driveway with a furious HOA president accusing me of grand theft auto. The sirens grew louder, and I could see the flashing lights bouncing off the houses at the far end of the street. My neighbors leaned in closer to their windows. Karen stood tall, chest puffed out, as if she were about to receive an award for bravery. I stayed put, my hands in plain sight, determined not to give anyone the wrong impression. The officers were going to see the truth soon enough. Still, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling creeping up my spine. In today's world, perception can be as dangerous as reality, and right now, thanks to Karen's lies, the perception was that I was a car thief caught red-handed. The patrol car rolled up, and two officers stepped out. Their eyes flicked from Karen to me to the sleek black sedan in my garage. The younger one spoke first, his voice calm but firm. "Sir, can you step away from the vehicle, please?" And in that tense moment, as I took a slow step back, I realized this wasn't just about a car anymore. Karen wasn't just trying to humiliate me, she was trying to make me the villain of a story she had already written in her head. The officers approached with steady, deliberate steps, their eyes scanning the scene as if weighing every detail before deciding how to proceed. The younger one, who had asked me to step back, looked like he was in his late 20s, tall and fit with a nonsense posture. The older officer had the calm, weathered look of someone who'd seen enough neighborhood disputes to last a lifetime. He didn't seem rushed. That was a small relief. Karen wasted no time. She practically leapt toward them, heels clicking on the driveway, one hand waving dramatically toward the car. "That's him. That's the man who stole my car. I caught him red-handed this morning trying to drive it away." The younger officer raised his hand in a quieting gesture, and she took a step back, though the outrage was still plastered all over her face. "Ma'am," he said, "we'll hear from you in just a moment. Let's start with him." He turned to me. "Sir, your name?" "Mark Phillips," I replied, keeping my voice even. "And what's going on here in your words?" I explained from the beginning how I'd come back from my business trip 2 days ago, opened my garage, and found the black sedan sitting there, how I hadn't touched it, hadn't driven it, and had no idea who put it there, how my wife could vouch for me, and that the garage had been locked until that morning when I opened it. I even pointed out the dealer plates and mentioned I recognized the car from Karen's bragging at the HOA meeting. She claims it's hers. I finished, but I believe it was delivered to my house by mistake. I was going to call the dealership to have it removed. The older officer scribbled notes while I spoke. The younger one nodded but didn't offer an opinion yet. Karen jumped back in the moment I finished. "Don't believe a word of it," she exclaimed. "This man has been nothing but trouble in this neighborhood. He hates me because I enforce the rules. Now he's trying to humiliate me by stealing my car, the one I just bought outright yesterday." That claim made the older officer glance up from his notepad. "You have proof of purchase, ma'am?" Karen hesitated just for a fraction of a second but recovered quickly. "Of course I do. The paperwork's at my house. I can go get it right now." "We'll need to see that," the older officer said calmly. "And we'll also need the delivery records from the dealership." The younger officer walked over to the sedan, crouching slightly to inspect the temporary plates. He radioed in the plate number, and I could hear the faint crackle of a dispatcher responding, though I couldn't make out the words. Karen shifted uncomfortably as the minutes ticked by. While we waited, I caught sight of more neighbors gathering at safe distances. Some stood behind hedges, others at second-floor windows. The teenagers were still filming, clearly enjoying the drama. I could almost hear tomorrow's gossip forming in their heads. "Did you hear Mark tried to steal Karen's car?" The dispatcher's reply came back, and I saw the younger officer's brow furrow slightly. He asked something else into the radio, listened again, then straightened up. "Ma'am," he said, turning toward Karen, "the registration shows this vehicle is still owned by the dealership. Can you explain that?" Karen's face flushed deep red. Well, yes. Technically, it's still under their name because the financing paperwork is being processed, but it's my car. I've already made the down payment. That doesn't make it your property yet," the older officer said, his tone still calm but firm. "Until the transaction is finalized, the car belongs to the dealership." Her voice pitched higher. "That doesn't mean he can just take it." I couldn't help myself. "Karen, I didn't take it. It's been sitting here because someone from the dealership put it here. My guess is they got the address wrong. The younger officer glanced between us. Ma'am, what address did you give the dealership for delivery? She hesitated again. I told them my house number. But your exact house number, please, he pressed. 1423, she said reluctantly. The officer held up his notepad. This address is 1425. That's where the delivery slip says the car was sent. The dealership put it exactly where they were told. The moment the number left his mouth, I saw the realization flicker across Karen's face. Immediately by panic, she'd messed up the address herself. But instead of admitting it, she doubled down. That doesn't matter, she barked. This is a private vehicle meant for me, and he's had it in his garage for 2 days without telling anyone. That's suspicious. The older officer sighed, clearly running out of patience. Ma'am, accusing someone of theft is serious, and calling 911 for a situation like this without confirming the facts can be considered a false report. That's also serious. Karen's eyes widened slightly, but she recovered quickly, folding her arms. I was just trying to protect my property. You were trying to protect a car that isn't legally yours yet. The younger officer corrected, and that was delivered to the wrong address because of incorrect information. That's not theft, that's a delivery error. Karen opened her mouth again, but this time the older officer stopped her with a look. We're going to contact the dealership directly to verify everything. While we do that, I suggest you calm down. She turned her glare toward me instead, her lips pressed so tightly together they almost disappeared. If looks could kill, I'd have been on the pavement. The younger officer made the call to the dealership while the older one asked me to step inside my garage with him so he could take a quick look around. He scanned the walls, the locked side door, the workbench, and even the dusty shelves lined with half-empty paint cans. Everything screamed lived in, not crime scene. You said you've been out of town, he asked. Yeah, I got back Friday night. My truck was parked outside the whole time. The garage was locked, and I don't give out my code to anyone but my wife. He nodded. Looks like it hasn't been touched, I believe you. Let's see what the dealership says. When we stepped back outside, the younger officer was finishing up his call. Confirmed, he said. They have the delivery record. Here, the buyer Karen provided this address. The delivery driver followed instructions. She also hasn't completed the payment process, so the car belongs to the dealership until that's done. The older officer looked at Karen. Ma'am, it's exactly as we suspected, a delivery mistake caused by the address you gave. This man did nothing wrong. He didn't touch the car, didn't move it, and didn't try to hide it. You could have resolved this by calling the dealership instead of making an emergency call. Karen's jaw worked soundlessly for a moment before she finally blurted, I just thought that he was a criminal. I finished for her. She shot me a glare sharp enough to cut steel. But the officers stepped between us before it could escalate. Ma'am, the younger officer said. Because you called 911 and made a false theft report, we have to document this. Depending on how the dealership wants to proceed, there could be consequences. I suggest you cooperate fully with them to get your car delivered to the correct address. That wiped the smugness off her face. She mumbled something about talking to a lawyer and stormed back toward her house without another word. The officers turned back to me. We'll stick around until the dealership sends someone to move the vehicle, the older one said. For now, you can go about your day. Thanks, I said. I appreciate you getting to the bottom of it. As they positioned their patrol car near the curb, I noticed the neighbors beginning to retreat into their homes. The teenagers lowered their phones, disappointed that the scene was winding down. The street felt a little less charged, but I knew this wasn't the end. Karen wasn't the type to let something like this go quietly. Emily came outside, having watched the whole thing from the living room. She handed me a fresh cup of coffee, shaking her head. Only you could end up in a police investigation before breakfast, she teased, though there was concern in her eyes. I gave a half smile, not sure I can take credit for this one. Karen just handed it to me. The dealership's tow truck arrived about 20 minutes later, its engine rumbling as the driver hopped out. He was a tall, good-natured guy in a navy jumpsuit, holding a clipboard. Got a call about a missed delivery, he said, glancing at the car. Guessing this is the one. Yep, I said. Been sitting here since Friday. Mind if I pull it out, please, I said, stepping aside as he backed the sedan out of my garage. I couldn't help but notice Karen peeking from behind her curtains across the street. She looked furious, her lips moving as if she were muttering to herself. The tow driver didn't seem to notice. He secured the car, signed a few papers for the officers, and drove off without incident. The patrol car followed him down the street, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than before. I stood in my driveway for a moment, sipping my coffee, staring at the empty space in my garage. Emily came to stand beside me. You know she's going to try something else, right? I nodded slowly. Yeah, but next time I'll be ready. For 2 days after the car fiasco, things in the neighborhood were eerily calm. Karen hadn't come knocking, hadn't called, and hadn't sent one of her infamous HOA violation letters about my lawn height or trash bin placement. That alone should have been a red flag. Karen didn't do quiet. She only paused long enough to reload. By the third morning, my suspicion was confirmed. I opened my mailbox to find a thick official-looking envelope stamped with the HOA logo in the corner. Inside was a formal notice of violation, accusing me of multiple infractions, most of which was so ridiculous I actually laughed out loud. Apparently my mailbox paint was non-compliant with community standards. My truck obstructed neighborhood aesthetics when parked in my own driveway, and the potted plants on my porch presented a tripping hazard to visitors. The letter gave me 10 days to rectify all issues or face fines of up to $500 per violation. Emily found me standing in the kitchen with the letter in one hand and my coffee in the other, shaking my head. "Let me guess," she said. "Curtains. Revenge." "Bingo," I said, sliding the letter across the counter so she could read it. She couldn't prove I stole her car, so now she's coming after me through the H. Emily read the list and snorted. "A tripping hazard. Those plants have been there for years, and she's walked past them dozens of times." "That's the point," I said. "None of this is about the plants or the mailbox. It's about making my life miserable." Later that day, I attended the scheduled HOA meeting partly out of obligation, partly out of curiosity to see how Karen would act in public after her false police report. The community center's meeting room smelled faintly of coffee and furniture polish, and a dozen neighbors sat scattered around the folding tables. Karen naturally was at the head of the table, shuffling papers with the smug air of a judge, about to hand down a sentence. The meeting droned on about landscaping budgets and neighborhood watch schedules until Karen reached the violation reports section. She cleared her throat, looked directly at me, and said, "We have received numerous complaints about certain homeowners not following our community guidelines. In particular," she paused for effect, "house number 1425 has multiple documented violations that must be addressed immediately." Every head in the room turned toward me first. Karen continued, "The mailbox at 1425 is painted in a color that is not approved in our HOA handbook. Second, the vehicle regularly parked in the driveway is oversized and does not meet our visual harmony standards. Third," she tapped her papers like she was revealing state secrets, "there are objects on the front porch that create a safety risk for pedestrians." I waited for her to finish, then raised my hand. "Karen, let me save everyone some time. These so-called violations appeared in my mailbox less than 48 hours after you had to admit to the police that you called 911 on me for no reason. This is retaliation, plain and simple." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the room. Karen's smile tightened. "These reports are based on legitimate complaints from concerned residents. My personal interactions with you have nothing to do with this process." "That's a lie," I said, my voice steady but loud enough for everyone to hear. "My mailbox has been the same color for 5 years. My truck has been parked in that driveway since the day I moved in. And those dangerous objects on my porch, they're potted plants. If they're suddenly a hazard, then half the houses here are in violation." A few neighbors chuckled quietly. Karen's eyes narrowed. "This meeting is not the place for personal attacks," she said stiffly. "No," I replied, "but it is the place for accountability. And if you're going to use the HOA to settle your personal grudges, I think everyone here deserves to know." One of the older residents, Mr. Collins, cleared his throat. "Karen, it does seem strange that Mark's violations popped up right after that police business. I think maybe we should take a closer look before handing out fines." Karen's jaw tightened. "The rules apply to everyone, Mr. Collins. If we start making exceptions, the whole system falls apart." "Making exceptions isn't the same as making up violations," another neighbor, Lisa, chimed in. "I saw the police here the other day. Mark didn't do anything wrong with that car situation. Maybe we should focus on real issues instead of nitpicking." For a split second, Karen looked rattled, but she quickly shuffled her papers and moved on to the next topic, ignoring the pushback still. I could see the storm brewing in her eyes. She wasn't backing down. After the meeting, as people filed out, Karen cornered me by the doorway. Her voice was low but dripping with venom. "You think you're clever, embarrassing me like that. But I run this neighborhood, Mark, and I promise, you'll regret crossing me." I stared at her for a moment, then smiled faintly. "You already tried once. Karen, didn't work out too well, did it?" She didn't reply, just spun on her heel and stalked off toward her car. By the weekend, the violations had turned into daily annoyances. I found anonymous notes taped to my front door with phrases like "follow the rules" or "face the fines" and "HOA is watching." Someone even left a printout of the HOA handbook in my mailbox with the vehicle standards section highlighted. I wasn't naive. It was Karen, or one of her loyal little foot soldiers, doing her bidding, rather than reacting. I decided to do my homework. I spent hours reading through the HOA bylaws, cross-referencing every accusation in her letter. Not only were her claims flimsy, but she'd also misquoted the regulations in a few spots. My non-compliant mailbox, the handbook only listed 2 prohibited colors, neither of which mine matched. My truck, the rule about oversized vehicles applied only to commercial trucks over a certain height, which mine didn't exceed. And the so-called tripping hazard. The guidelines actually encourage tasteful porch decorations. Armed with this information, I drafted a formal response letter, citing each bylaw and attaching dated photos proving the longevity of my mailbox. plants, and vehicle. I sent copies to the HOA board, bypassing Karen entirely. I knew it would irritate her, but I also knew it would force the board to address her abuse of power. A few days later, I got a call from Mr. Collins, who served as the board's treasurer. "Mark," he said, "I reviewed your response. You're right, there's no basis for these violations. I'll be bringing it up in our next closed session." "Appreciate it," I said. "Just tired of being her personal target." He chuckled dryly. "You're not the first, trust me, but she's never pulled something this blatant before. The board's not happy about it." That night, I sat on my porch sipping a beer, watching the quiet street. Karen's house was lit, up across the way, her curtains drawn tight. I wondered if she was inside, plotting her next move. For the first time since this mess started, I felt like I had the upper hand, not because I'd won anything yet, but because she'd exposed herself. The more she pushed, the more obvious her vendetta became. Still, I wasn't naive enough to think it was over. Karen was the type to double down when cornered, and judging by the cold stares I got from a few of her HOA loyalists over the next couple of days, she'd already started rallying them to her side. The tension came to a head one afternoon when I pulled into my driveway and found her standing there with two other board members. She was holding a clipboard, smiling like a predator that thought it had cornered its prey. "Mark," she said sweetly, "we're here to conduct an inspection of your property." I stepped out of my truck slowly, without notice. "That's not how it works, Karen." She waved the clipboard. "We're within our rights. Article 5, Section 3. The board may inspect any property within the community to ensure compliance." I smiled thinly. "Finish the quote, Karen." With reasonable prior notice to the homeowner. One of the board members shifted uncomfortably. "He's right, Karen. We can't just show up." Her smile faltered. "Well, we're here now, so he might as well let us look around." "Not happening," I said. "You want to inspect? You put it in writing, and we'll schedule it. Until then, get off my property." Her cheeks flushed, but she didn't argue further. She turned sharply, muttering something under her breath as she walked away. The other two followed, one of them giving me a small, apologetic shrug. As they left, I realized something important. Karen wasn't just trying to win a petty feud anymore. She was trying to wear me down mentally, financially, and socially. But in doing so, she'd started breaking her own rules. And if there was one thing people like Karen hated more than losing, it was being caught violating the very system they built to control others. I leaned against my truck, watching her retreat to her house. Whatever came next, I was ready. If she wanted a war, I'd fight it on paper, in meetings, and in front of the entire neighborhood. And I'd make sure every move she made left a trail she couldn't erase. Because in a place like this, truth had a funny way of catching up no matter how loud the lies were shouted. It didn't take long for Karen to make her next move. By the following week, a letter arrived in a plain envelope without the HOA logo, meaning this wasn't just another bogus violation notice. The return address was from a law office downtown. My stomach tightened as I opened it, scanning the dense, formal language. The letter accused me of defamation of character against Karen, citing my comments at the last HOA meeting and various public statements I had allegedly made to neighbors. It demanded a formal written apology, removal of harmful statements, and a payment of $5,000 in damages within 14 days to avoid escalation to formal litigation. I read it twice, then a third time, partly to make sure I wasn't hallucinating and partly because the absurdity was almost laughable. Emily walked in from the backyard and saw the expression on my face. "What now?" she asked. I handed her the letter. She read it, then burst out laughing. "She's suing you for telling the truth. Does she think she can just slap legal threats on letterhead and make people fold?" "That's exactly what she's hoping for," I said. "She's betting I'll panic and pay up to make her go away." Emily shook her head. "So what are you going to do?" "Fight back," I said simply. The next day, I called my friend Ben, real estate attorney I'd met years ago when I bought the house. He wasn't a litigator, but he knew plenty of them. After a quick explanation, he chuckled. "Mark, this letter is a joke. It's probably not even from a real law firm. Send me a copy, I'll check the credentials." Sure enough, 2 hours later he called back. "The law office is just a one-room operation that mostly does wills and notarizations. The guy isn't even a litigation attorney, my guess. Karen paid him a couple $100 to draft something intimidating that gave me a bit of breathing room, but I wasn't going to stop there. I wrote a formal reply, calm, factual, and dripping with politeness that stated I had made no false statements, had proof of all my claims, and considered the matter closed. I also included a line noting that any further baseless threats would be forwarded to my attorney. 2 days later, I received an email from Ben with an attachment, a PDF of the HOA's bylaws regarding board member conduct. The section he highlighted made me smile. Board members were prohibited from using their positions for personal gain or retaliation, and doing so could result in immediate removal from the board. "This is your silver bullet," Ben said over the phone. "If she keeps it up, you can go to the board with a formal misconduct complaint, but it's better if she hands you the evidence herself." It turned out I wouldn't have to wait long. That weekend, Karen decided to up the pressure. I came home from running errands to find a bright orange sign posted in my front yard. HOA violation, property under review. I yanked it out of the ground and marched straight over to Karen's house. She opened the door with that smug painted smile. "Can I help you, Mark?" "Yeah," I said, holding up the sign. "Why is this in my yard?" "Community awareness," she replied sweetly. "Homeowners have the right to know when a property is not in compliance." "There's no compliance issue," I said, keeping my voice even, "and you know it. This is harassment." Karen leaned on the doorframe. "You can call it whatever you want. I call it doing my job." I took a slow breath, deciding not to give her the satisfaction of seeing me lose my temper. "Fine. Just remember, Karen, every stunt you pull gets documented. And one day, that's going to matter." She laughed, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. I walked away without another word. That night, I emailed photos of the sign to the entire HOA board, along with the violation letter, the bogus legal threat, and a summary of the police report from the car incident. I attached a copy of the misconduct clause Ben had found. My email was short. "This is a pattern of targeted harassment by the board president. Please advise on the process for a formal complaint." The next morning, Mr. Collins called me. "Mark, I've been on this board for 8 years, and I've never seen anything like this. Half the board is furious with Karen. We're holding an emergency session this week. You should be there." I didn't have to think twice. "I'll be there." The meeting was closed to the public, but since I was the one filing the complaint, I was allowed in to present my case. Karen was already seated at the long table when I walked in, shuffling her papers like she was preparing to read a court verdict. The rest of the board members were scattered around, some looking uncomfortable, others openly annoyed. Mr. Collins opened the session. "We're here to address a complaint from homeowner Mark Phillips against board president Karen Lewis regarding misuse of HOA authority for personal retaliation. Mr. Phillips, you have the floor." I kept it simple. I laid out the timeline, the false police report, the sudden violation notices, the attempted property inspection without notice, the bogus legal threat, and the sign in my yard. I passed around copies of the police report, the violation letter, the lawyer's letter, and photos of the sign. When I finished, Karen jumped in. "These are all legitimate enforcement actions. He's twisting the facts to make me look bad." One of the board members, a woman named Rachel, leaned forward. "Karen, the police report says you made a false theft claim. The dealership confirmed the delivery mistake was your fault. That alone undermines your credibility." Another member, Dan, added, "And the legal threat. That's way outside the scope of HOA authority. You used your personal money and connections to intimidate a homeowner you have a personal conflict with. That's a clear ethics violation." Karen's voice rose. "He embarrassed me in front of the whole neighborhood. That meeting," Mr. Collins cut in, "is exactly why we have bylaws to prevent personal vendettas from becoming HOA policy. This is not about your feelings, Karen. It's about your actions." Karen's cheeks flushed bright red. She shuffled her papers again but didn't speak. After a short deliberation, the board voted for 2-2 formally censure Karen for misconduct and strip her of unilateral enforcement powers. She would remain president for now, but any future violation notices against me would require board approval. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was enough to take the teeth out of her campaign against me. I left the meeting with a quiet sense of relief, though I knew Karen wouldn't see this as the end. Sure enough, the next day I caught her glaring at me from her driveway as I mowed the lawn. She didn't say anything, but the look in her eyes told me she was already planning her next move. The difference now was that she'd have to work a lot harder to get away with it. That evening, Emily and I sat on the porch watching the sun dip behind the rooftops. "So," she said, "you think she's finally going to back off?" I took a sip of my beer and shook my head. "Not a chance. People like Karen don't back off. They just change tactics." Emily smiled faintly. "Well, at least now she can't blindside you." "True," I said, "but something tells me this isn't just about the car anymore. This is about control, and she hates that she's losing it." As the streetlights flickered on and the crickets started their nightly chorus, I realized this wasn't just a feud anymore. It was a battle for who got to set the rules in this neighborhood. And whether Karen liked it or not, I was done playing defense. The tow truck pulled away from my driveway, its steel winch rattling as it carried Karen's brand new sedan down the street. The sound echoed through the neighborhood like a slow, inevitable end to a bad movie. I stood on the porch, hands in my pockets, watching the taillights fade. It should have felt like closure, but my heart was still pounding with leftover adrenaline. My garage door was closed now, the quiet hum of the motor still in my ears, but the image of Karen screaming and pointing her finger in my face replayed in my mind like a broken record. It was hard to believe that just hours earlier, she had, when calling me a thief in front of half the neighborhood. The police had left not long before, after making it clear to Karen that she was in serious trouble for filing a false report. She hadn't gone quietly. Her voice could probably still be heard in the next zip code. But the moment they put her in the back of the cruiser, her tone changed from fury to pleading. She'd tried to convince them she had made an honest mistaken that I shouldn't press charges. I didn't respond at the time. I was too busy giving my own statement and explaining how I found the car in my garage in the first place. I thought about those words now, about whether I should pursue this further or let it go. Part of me wanted to walk away from the whole mess, but another part knew people like Karen didn't learn from their mistakes unless they had to face the consequences. My phone buzzed in my pocket, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was a text from Detective Wilson, the officer who had taken the lead in the situation. He'd promised to update me once they finished questioning. Karen, the message was brief. We've confirmed the dealer paperwork. She will likely face charges for the false report and trespassing. We'll keep you posted. I exhaled, a mixture of relief and disbelief washing over me. Even now, it felt surreal that this whole nightmare had started over something so avoidable. If Karen had simply knocked on my door and asked about the car, none of this would have happened. Instead, she'd turned it into a full-blown neighborhood scandal. The scandal part, unfortunately, was still alive and well. The minute the police, cars, and tow truck left, the neighborhood gossip machine kicked into overdrive. I could see curtains twitch and blinds parting as people tried to piece together the story. My phone had been lighting up all afternoon with texts from neighbors. Some were supportive messages like "we saw what happened, she's lost her mind," or "good for you for standing your ground." Others were more cautious, asking for my side before they believed what Karen might be telling people. I knew Karen well enough to guess she would spin her own version of events, one where she was the victim and I was the conniving neighbor trying to steal her new car. The truth might have been on my side, but in a close-knit neighborhood like ours, perception was everything. I decided to take a walk, hoping fresh air would clear my head. As I strolled down the street, I noticed a small group gathered near the mailbox cluster, 3 neighbors deep in conversation. The moment I approached, they fell silent. I gave them a polite nod, but one of them, Mrs. Lewis, stepped forward. "We saw the whole thing," she said, her voice low but firm. "Don't let her scare you. That woman has been causing trouble for years." I thanked her, grateful for the support. But then she added, "Just be careful. People like that, they don't take embarrassment well. She might try something again." That thought stayed with me as I walked back home. Embarrassment was exactly what Karen had suffered today, and knowing her, she would either retreat for a while or double down in some petty way. I didn't like the idea of keeping my guard up, but after what had happened, I knew it was necessary. I checked my security cameras again when I got home, making sure they'd recorded every moment from the garage door opening to the police arriving. The footage was clear, and I backed it up to a cloud drive just in case it was nearly sunset when Detective Wilson called. "We've taken her statement," he said, his tone steady but carrying an undertone of disbelief. "She's claiming she had the right to retrieve her car because it was delivered to the wrong address. She's ignoring the fact that she trespassed onto your property and accused you of theft." I could hear papers shuffling in the background. "The dealership has confirmed they sent it to your address by mistake, but that doesn't give her the right to make a false report. She'll be cited for trespassing and misuse of emergency services. The DA will decide if it goes further." I thanked him for the update and hung up, leaning back in my chair. A sense of justice, however small, it started to settle in. The law was handling it now, and for the first time since the garage door opened that morning, I felt a bit of the tension in my chesties. Still, I knew this would be the talk of the neighborhood for weeks. The HOA might try to spin it, especially if Karen still had allies on the board. I'd have to be ready for that too. Later that night, I stood in the garage, staring at the now empty space where the sedan had been. The concrete floor was bare, the faint scent of new car leather already gone. I thought about how absurd it was that a single delivery mistake had turned into this wild day. But more than that, I thought about how quickly someone's pride could turn into aggression, and how dangerous that could be when paired with authority, in this case, Karen's self-appointed role as HOA president. The following morning, I woke up to find a folded note on my doorstep. The handwriting was unmistakable. Karen's. The message was short. "We both overreacted. Let's just forget this happened." I stared at the paper for a long moment before tossing it into the trash. Forget it happened. Not a chance. Not after the lies, the yelling, and the police cars lined up on my street. She wanted it to go away because it made her look bad, not because she regretted what she'd done. I had no interest in giving her a clean slate to do it to someone else. Over the next week, life slowly returned to normal. Karen kept a low profile, probably on advice from her lawyer. I saw her car parked at the dealer's lot one afternoon, still without plates. Apparently she hadn't finished the purchase process after all. The HOA meetings went on as scheduled, though she didn't attend the next one. In her absence, a few members even brought up concerns about her leadership. Whether that would lead to her losing her position remained to be seen, but I couldn't deny I felt a small spark of hope. Maybe this incident would finally make people see her for what she really was. One evening, as I watered my front lawn, Mr. Green from 2 houses down stopped by. "Heard Karen's lawyer is trying to settle with the DA, he said casually, like he was talking about the weather. "Word is, she's hoping to avoid a criminal record." I nodded, not surprised. "She's lucky if that works out," I replied, "because she could have been facing a lot worse." He smirked. Well, you handled yourself better than most would have. That counts for something. I didn't know if it counted for much, but I appreciated the sentiment. In the end, a whole ordeal had reminded me of one thing. Standing your ground isn't about winning some dramatic victory, it's about refusing to let someone's lies define you. Karen could tell whatever stories she wanted, but I knew the truth. The footage, the police report, the dealership's records, they all told the same story, and none of them put me in the wrong dot. As summer drifted on, the incident slowly faded into the background noise of neighborhood life. Kids played in driveways, sprinklers ticked in the evenings, and the smell of barbecue floated through the air. But I kept my cameras rolling, my garage door locked, and my eyes open. If Karen or anyone else ever thought about trying something like this again, I'd be ready. Sometimes, the quiet after a storm feels heavier than the storm itself. But in that quiet, I found a kind of peace. Karen's car was gone, her accusations, what had backfired, and my reputation was intact. And in our little slice of suburbia, that was as close to a happy ending as you could get. For more real-life stories like this, don't miss Bright Reality on YouTube. For videos, like, share, comment, and subscribe to the channel.